I'm a 17-year-old girl living in Oklahoma. When daylight savings time happens in winter, our sunset changes from around 7 or 8 p.m. to about 5:30 or 6 p.m. This means it gets dark pretty early, around 5:30, and you can only see a little light from street lamps if you're outside. The place I live in has been getting worse over time. It used to be nice, but now there's more crime, drugs, and other bad things happening. In the past, it was considered a safe place to live, and people used to call me spoiled because many homes were really nice. I work at a vet clinic that's about 4 blocks away from my house. It's convenient because I can get to work and back home quickly. Right now, I live with my parents and they usually give me a ride, as I don't have my own car. On other end, I'm a cattle tech for reference, which means I take care of all the dogs and cats, clean the floors and counters, wash dishes, do laundry, and take out all the trash. I make sure everything is safe and locked when I finish. I work a shift that's considered nighttime, but I'm usually done by around 7 to 7:30, even though we officially close at 6. It's always dark outside when I leave, even if I'm done around 5:45. So one night, after a very long day, I was really tired as we had a lot of cows and pets to take care of, and a coworker named Greg had missed his shift without telling anyone. I drank a Red Bull and told my boss I could handle it by myself, hoping to make her impressed. But sadly, it was a big mistake, as I ended up staying there until 8 p.m., which is really late for someone working with dogs and cats at the kennel. We usually only take care of dogs and cats, and we usually stop taking new customers after 5 p.m. When I finally finished my work, I did the last rounds. I said goodnight to the dogs and cats, started the last load of laundry in the dryer, and headed towards the exit. I clocked out, set the alarm, locked the door really well, and had only taken 2 steps when I noticed 3 guys hanging around near our mailbox, about 300 feet away. Remember, this is a neighborhood where people live and there's nothing but houses around. So there was really no good reason for anyone to be at the clinic. There's a convenience store and a CVS just down the road if they needed something. I closed the heavy door with a big slam, using my body because it was really heavy, maybe like 200 pounds or more, so it made a lot of noise, and when I looked back, they all saw me. One of them, who was tall and wide, stared at me for about 10 seconds. His hood was pulled up high, so I couldn't see his face. I got really worried and scared when I saw them. My heart raced, and I knew something was wrong. I remembered what I was told to do, so I tried to walk around them, giving them a lot of space. I took about 8 steps, and then I heard footsteps coming after me. The moment I heard the first step, I quickly turned and ran back to the door. I held my key in my hand, like Wolverine does, because I always walk like that. So I struggled with the lock for a bit and finally unlocked the heavy bolt. So when I got inside, and my heart sank when one of them grabbed my sleeve, just as the door closed on his fingers. I was so relieved to hear him scream in pain, and I actually felt glad that the door was so heavy. But I didn't enter the building gracefully, so I tripped as I rushed inside, trying to get him off my sleeve. I started having a panic attack right away, breathing really fast and crying, as I tried to crawl away from the door. I got even more scared when I saw blood on my hands and the floor. I accidentally bit my lip and hit the ground really hard, making my eyebrow bleed. The alarm was making a loud noise, the dogs were barking, and the 3 men were hitting the strong window on the back door, yelling bad words at me. I was never so scared, and the guy in the front of the group looked really mean when he stared at me through the glass. I was in a state of confusion and panic. I didn't know how to turn off the alarm, so I just curled up under the counter and cried until they stopped about 15 minutes later. Around that time, the police arrived. When you don't turn off the alarms within 30 seconds, it tells the alarm company, which then tells my boss. They decide whether to turn off the alarm or call for help. I was really out of it and didn't react to sounds or light. I got scared when a police officer touched me, but I don't remember anything after I went under the counter. My memory started working again when my parents arrived. The 3 guys who tried to get in ended up hurting themselves. One broke 3 fingers in our door, and another fell on the floor like I did. It's kind of funny, thinking back, that they were all clumsy. I needed a couple of stitches on my lip and a staple on my eyebrow. I later found out that they had been watching me for about a week. They checked the videos and saw that they were hanging around the clinic almost every day, but they never did anything. That's because I usually had a ride home or my bosses stayed and talked for 30 or 40 minutes after we closed. All three of those guys had warrants for their arrests because of drugs and hurting people. One of them was even connected to a bunch of car thefts in the area. They won't be free to walk around for a while. I'm a 25-year-old woman, and I work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station in California. This gas station is situated near a highway just outside of San Diego, so it's not unusual to see a lot of people coming in and out throughout the night. Like always, I punched in, said goodnight to my coworker, and got ready to begin my shift. Surprisingly, that night was quite busy, even though it was a Wednesday. Things began just like any other typical night, until a couple of hours into my shift. I was helping a few customers at the counter when the phone suddenly started ringing. I usually try to avoid answering the phone whenever possible, as I'm not a fan of dealing with callers. In one situation, it worked out well because I was helping customers. But usually, if I didn't have a good reason, I had to answer all the calls we got. Sometimes, my boss got upset with me for not picking up the phone, as he said he checks the call history every time he's around. Anyway, I finished helping the customers and then the phone stopped ringing. After about 5 minutes, it rang again. This time, I had to answer because I was on my phone in the back room. I said, "Hello, how can I help you?" like my boss makes me say, as he also seems to listen to phone calls. In the first few seconds, there was silence. Right when I was about to hang up, I heard a man's voice say, "Is Tommy there?" Keep in mind, I've been working here for the past year, so I'd know if there is, or was, an employee by that name. I replied, "No, there's no Tommy here, sorry," and they hung up. I honestly thought nothing of it, and went in the back to go on my phone. Fast forward another hour, it was probably around 1 or so, and the traffic both inside and on the roads died down. I decided to get started on the overnight stalking, which was best to do when there weren't any people. As I was doing this, the phone rang again. I picked it up, saying the usual, "Hi, how can I help you?" But no response. So I tried saying hello a few more times, but when no one responded, I hung up and went back to my tasks. But just as I got back to what I was doing, the phone rang again. I answered, but again no one responding, so I began thinking it might be a prank call, because it was really strange and odd if someone had a real question. Then things got even stranger. Almost as quickly as the last 2 calls, the phone started ringing again. I went to the counter and saw it was the same person calling. So I didn't pick up and went back to work. For the next 10 minutes, the phone kept ringing. Each time, the calls were closer together. After what felt like 100 calls, I got really frustrated and answered angrily, saying, "Please stop calling, it's not funny." Then I hung up. Surprisingly, the phone didn't ring again, and I thought the annoying calls were finally done. But I was mistaken. About 20 minutes later, while I was counting the money in the cash register, I saw a white car with 4 doors parked next to my car on the building side. I glanced at it briefly, then went back to counting. That's when the phone rang, and it was the same number that had called before. I ignored it, annoyed, but also a little freaked out now. As I finished counting, I closed the cash register and looked at the security cameras. The white car was still there, which was strange. No one had gotten out or anything, it was just sitting there, with both the lights and the engine off. I'm usually one to not get spooked, but the combination of the weird phone calls, and now this car sitting outside for the past 10 minutes, was admittedly starting to scare me. I went and sat down in the back room when the phone started ringing. I got up and checked the number, seeing that it was still the same person harassing me. I picked it up and sternly said, "If you call this number again, I will be contacting the police." As I waited for a reply in complete silence, my skin turned cold. When suddenly I glanced at the window and saw a man wearing a black poncho and had his phone by his ear, was staring at me through the glass. He was really close, just a few steps away. I got scared and shouted, then hung up the phone. I hurried into the back room and locked the door. I checked the security camera footage, where the man was still there, not moving, just looking in. On other end the phone kept ringing, and every time it did, the man held his phone to his ear and dialed again whenever I didn't answer. This kept happening for 10 whole minutes, then a couple of guys came over to him and seemed to ask him to go away. I saw him go to his car, but he didn't actually leave. He stayed inside the car. I still had a few hours left at work, so I texted my coworker and asked if he could come in early. Surprisingly, he was awake and came in just 20 minutes later. Since the car was still there, I asked my coworker to walk with me outside, just to be safe. Then I frantically got in my car and drove home, constantly checking to see if he was following me, but he wasn't. When I got home, my coworker texted me, saying that the guy left in the opposite direction, within minutes of me leaving. I still work there to this day, and neither myself or any of my coworkers have seen this person return, and I still don't have an explanation.
My life was always crazy, but never did I think it was this crazy. This is my story. It was a summer day in 2011. I was 10 and my dad had gotten with his ex-girlfriend. That's a story for a different time. One was a year younger and the other one was older. I had a little brother as well. Now that you know the family, let me give you a little bit of background to this bone-chilling story. My dad was searching for a house to rent after breaking things off with my biological mother. And he found this house. And what's crazy is that my name is Ashley and it was off of Ashland Street. It seemed to be very cheap for the area. It was in a gated community, so of course it seemed very comfortable and safe. I mean, at least you'd think so. I moved with my dad into this house with his ex-girlfriend and her 2 boys. So there were 4 kids altogether. We will name them Kobe, the year younger, and Jerry, the older one, and then my little brother Brandon. I had changed their names for privacy. It was an older house, so nothing brand new was built. But it was definitely pretty cheap. I mean, for a gated high middle class neighborhood. We moved in, I don't remember the exact date, but it was in the summertime. I live in Vegas, so that the heat is sometimes unbearable. One day it can be 99 and the next it's 104. My dad wakes me up and is really excited about moving out and just being free. My biological mother was a freeloader and a real piece of work. My dad and I picked up all our boxes and we went to the house. Now, this is the first time that I have seen it, but of course my dad did a tour with the landlord. So I went through the place picking my bedroom and all the fun things you do when you move into a brand new house. I shared a room with my baby brother Brandon. He was like 4 or 5 at the time, so really young. I got the room I wanted, I guess, out of the 3 I could have picked. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, 2 upstairs and 1 downstairs. The first night wasn't anything out of the ordinary. We got Little Caesars pizza and watched Cops, my dad's favorite TV show. We went to bed and woke up like normal and went on about our day. Again, still really normal, nothing crazy. The second night was just as normal. It was about a week into living in the house when things started to happen. It was almost like the ghosts wanted to make sure we stayed or something. How sweet. So it was more like night 8 and I was walking up the stairs. I was alone in the house and the stairs had carpet. I walked up to them and I swear I kept hearing somebody walking behind me. But every time I would turn around, nothing would be there. I just kind of kept it to myself and told myself I was just paranoid about being at the new house by myself. I was the type of kid that was scared of the dark, and I still get scared easily to this day. I actually hate Halloween for that very reason. But these strange things just keep happening. The first spirit sighting was Kobe's birthday. He got a new spyware truck thing where you can put a camera on the toy truck and go around the house. It's kind of like a GoPro. Well, I decided to pull a prank on Jerry. So I put the camera in his room to prank him. He was asleep, so he would wake up and freak out that there was a camera. I mean, we were all under 12, so it was really funny to us. But that's not all I caught. I know the typical white woman in a white robe thing. I get it, but it was true. All we could see was a silhouette of a young woman, probably in her late 20s or early 30s, standing over him. Of course, as the young boys were so sweet, they had me go up to check myself. So, of course, we went upstairs, a little spooked but trying not to overthink it. And I went into his room. Jerry was still asleep and there was no woman in there. So I came downstairs and told myself that there's probably a glitch in the camera that just made it seem like somebody was there. So you all let it go. As some of you probably know, when you move into a house, especially an older one, the floor creaks and you might hear bumps in the night just because the furniture is settling, but only squeaks and creaks for a day or two. We kept hearing this noise almost like somebody was walking up and down the stairs all the time. But again, we all just put it out of our heads and said that it was the house settling. Maybe something fell. No matter what, we would try to find an explanation for the situation. But over time, it just got worse. My dad had signed an 18-month lease agreement. But we only stayed there for 4 because this is when things got absolutely crazy. Anyway, my school was definitely a walkable distance, so I walked to school and back home. I got home one day and my dad's girlfriend was at work and so was my dad. Kobe and Jerry were at their grandma's and Brandon was still in school, so I was all alone in the house. When I walked in, it was like something out of a horror movie. Picture this. You get home from a stressful day at school and when you open the door, it literally looks like somebody has robbed the place. The stove was on. Yes, the stove, like literal fire was on. Of course, my immediate reaction was to call my dad and tell him what was going on. As I got into the kitchen, all the cabinet doors were open and most of the plates were on the ground shattered. There was glass everywhere, even on the carpet. My dad, of course, got home with the cops, and the cops came in and did an investigation, all to find out that there was no foul play. So there was nothing anybody could really do. So, of course, my dad's now ex-girlfriend blames me. But I told her that I didn't do it, that I came home to this. Unfortunately, my dad played right into her trap and believed her. So I was grounded for breaking her plates, causing a fire. I was so mad, but I was 10. What was I gonna do? Run away? I kept trying to convince my dad that I didn't do this, but pretty soon he wouldn't need any convincing. While we were all downstairs playing and talking one day, upstairs in my parents' bedroom, there were 3 loud booms, all at one after the other. Just boom, boom, boom. My dad and his now ex and myself all ran up the stairs to find that my parents' bed was broken. It almost looked like somebody had jumped on it really hard, and that's how it broke. The mattress was caved into the bed frame. I just looked at my dad with a cookie attitude and said, "So, did I do that too?" My dad actually apologized to me that night, but not his girlfriend. She never liked me, but that was another story, like I say. Under the staircase, we had storage. The door to that slammed, but the AC unit was close by the door. So I had just thought that maybe somebody had left it open and the wind had pushed it shut. It wasn't a very heavy door. The next night was definitely one of the scariest nights of my life. It was around 8 p.m. and we were all settling down for the night. I had school the next morning as everybody was going to bed. It was around 10 going on 11. As I was about to sit on the bed, I heard two knocks on the door. I could see a shadowy impression of feet under the door. So when I opened it, it was confusing to see nobody there. I closed it again, thinking that it had to be one of my brothers playing a mean trick on me. Again, I scare easily, so that was their thing. I heard the knocks again, and like the first time, I opened it, but nothing was there. And I didn't hear anybody run away. I went to Kobe's room. He was fast asleep. Then I went to Jerry's room, and he was still awake. He told me he didn't knock or anything, and that he had been in his room the whole entire time. But I didn't really believe him. I had no choice but to just go back to my room and try to relax. Probably about another hour went by with nothing, no knocking or anything. But just as I had closed my eyes, I heard it again. I stood right by my door for about 10 minutes until the knocking happened again, and I immediately opened the door. And then in the silent darkness, I heard a giggle. I looked around the corner and there was nothing there. Everybody was asleep and nobody wouldn't have had time to get back to their bedroom. I just went to bed. The next morning, I tried to tell my dad what was happening, but he said I was just dreaming. I looked at him and said, "So is the kitchen and the fire and the bed, that was all a dream too, right? Because we're all either having some really crazy romance stuff happening, or there's more to it." My dad just shrugged it all off and told me to get ready for school. So I did. Probably about another week later, I ended up staying the night at a friend's house. I'll call her Emma, just again for privacy reasons. So after school, I took the bus back to Emma's house. I decided to confide in her about what had been going on. Her mother was a medium, so I guess she could speak to the souls that hadn't crossed over or something. Or as she would say, departed. When I came in close contact with her, she looked at me with fear in her eyes. It was like she knew what was going on before I even told her. She told me that I had a very negative soul attached to me. It was a female soul, and all I could think was maybe it was my dad's ex or even my biological mother. But she said that it wasn't anybody I knew closely, and that's when I started to piece everything together. The woman standing over the bed, the fire, the bed breaking, the knocking, the giggling. It somehow all made sense in some way. The spirit was stuck, but my question was, how did she get there in the first place? My dad picked me up the morning after and I discussed with him what I had together. He said maybe the landlord would know more. So I told my dad to give him a call and tell him the pipe was loose or something so he could come over and have a conversation. You know, trick him, I guess. If he doesn't want to go into the detail about, he's definitely not going to over the phone. My dad agreed, and a few hours later the landlord arrived. My dad called me downstairs and we decided to go over everything with him, from the fire to the glass to the bed breaking to the women standing on the bed. As we were all talking downstairs in the living room, there was this mirror on the wall in front of us over the television. We were sitting on the couch, and as I looked up, I saw a lady wearing a very tall, almost like black witch hat, and she had very long grey hair. She just looked off like I knew from somewhere, but didn't at the same time. Of course, I reacted very startled, and my dad told me to relax. Like, yeah, Dad, let me just relax while all the stuff keeps happening. Why don't I just tell the ghost to make us a campfire as well? He didn't find it funny and sent me to my room. The landlord eventually left and fewer questions were answered. It was like he didn't want to say anything. Like our house almost blew up into flames and there was glass all over the kitchen. This isn't the time for secrets. Anyway, we looked up the address on a background search for properties, and we only found two things that could have been connected to this haunting. The first thing was that the entire neighborhood had been built on a Native American burial ground, and then we found something even sadder. A young couple was there. They had lived there once. They had two children. One day, out of nowhere, the dad came home drunk. He shot his wife and two kids and then set the house on fire, and unfortunately the house did burn to the ground and their remains were never found. so nobody knew who they were. It made total sense. The fire that started, the loud booms, the knocking, it was a sticky memory that I will never forget. I really hope that the family rests in peace, at least the wife and the kids. I can't imagine being taken out like that by your own father and husband. Anyway, that was the haunted house on Ashland Street. I've never been back since we moved out, and I will never go back again.